Welcome to the Hub Roundtable for the 30th of May, 2025. I'm Rudyard Griffiths, joined in conversation, as I always am, by my co-founder and editor-at-large, Sean Speer. Hey, Sean.
Hey, great to be with you, Richard.
You got a few frogs in the throat there, buddy. I sense another kind of moment of viral warfare has surged through the Spear household. Just how bad is it? I had this lovely schadenfreude of living through the traumatic phases of my family life when I had really young children like you, and those biological bombs would go off on a busy work week, and wow, it was something.
Yeah, that's right. It's like a science fiction dystopian novel playing out here at our household. I was joking with someone, Roger, that society doesn't tell aspiring or would-be parents how often kids get sick and how disruptive it is, or our fertility rate would fall even lower than it is. But we're getting through, and it's been a big week in Canadian policy and politics, of course, at the Hub. And
Yeah.
it's great to connect with you, if for no other reason than to get away from the germ factory that is downstairs below me.
Well, it's good for your immune system. Just remember that. This is like your immune system is patterning all this stuff, and it's going to serve you well in your dotage.
Exactly. Whenever the zombie apocalypse happens,
You're
I'll
fully
be in
equipped.
good shit shape.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No high-tech vaccines for you. You've acquired natural immunity for just about everything. Well, talk about getting support in a different kind of way, Sean. A new Hub Fellow joining us this week. Why don't you read out the name that joins the honor roll?
Yeah, grateful to Stephanie T from Sault Ste. Marie, from not too far from my neck of the woods in Northern Ontario. Thank you for your generous support, and for everyone who's come on to as supporters in the form of lifetime Hub Fellows, and of course the heroes and supporters that enable us to do the work that we do without drawing on government subsidies.
Yeah, here. Well, double barrel show this week on the first half, where we have our entire community with us here on YouTube and on our podcast channel. Let's talk about the week that was in politics with the throne speech, the kind of beginnings of the Carney economic agenda, being fleshed out a little bit in QP this week too. And then on the back half of the show, where we say goodbye to our complimentary listeners and viewers and join with our Hub Heroes and Hub Fellows, let's talk about a really interesting article that you've co-authored today on proportional representation and why the time may have come, not just for the usual suspects center-left to embrace PR, but for PR to truly be a cause that conservatives should really be thinking long and hard. And it's a great piece, and I want to go into that deeper with you. But let's start with the week that was. King Charles on the throne, so to speak, to read out this throne speech, a historic occasion. Top line takeaways. Maybe just start with the pageantry and the spectacle of it all. Was it a win for the Carney government?
I think it was, and it's a win for anyone, Richard, who, like us, likes politics and policy and the kind of institutionalism and tradition and all the rest that goes into this kind of stuff. Parliament hasn't sat for a long time, as our listeners and viewers know. And my sense, I wasn't there, but my sense was there was a kind of energy in Ottawa, Rudyard. And of course, part of that is the optimism around the Carney government and the extent to which it may or may not represent a break from the past decade. But even within conservative circles, I think there's something about getting together with one's colleagues and thinking about what comes next that, yeah, as I say, involves a degree of energy. But at a fundamental level, it seems to me the Carney government continues to advance a rhetorically ambitious agenda, a vision for the country. As we talked earlier in the week, the throne speech just set out what it characterized as an opportunity for the biggest economic transformation since the Second World War. And yet, we still don't have a lot of details about what precisely that transformation involves, what are the trade-offs, who will be affected, etc. And of course, the government's decision not to table the budget this spring means that we are going to have to wait until at least the fall to learn more about what it precisely means for the country and for our economy.
Yeah. I was actually up in Ottawa on Tuesday for other business, but I was around, at the periphery of some of the spectacle, and yeah, tons of people out on the streets. It was a beautiful, sunny, hot day. Tons of Canadian flags, some monarchists showing up with their own flags, a few Trump flags that were causing a lot of consternation as one or two, I guess, troublemakers decided to wave a flag that's not too popular in Ottawa or Canada at this moment. But yeah, look, I came away with it, Sean. Maybe, again, on this podcast, I'm maybe because I'm 10 years older than you, I'm kind of the half cup empty guy as opposed to the half cup full. And I felt that the throne speech was understandably long on rhetoric. They often are, but I thought this one kind of especially so. You quote that part right out of the gates where it's the biggest economic transformation since the Second World War. Like, wow, that's pretty big considering what's happened in the last 80 years, like the invention of the internet, stuff like that. And, now we're making a bid for the biggest economic transition in the country. And then when you actually get into the speech, so much of, in a sense, the status quo seemed to be reaffirmed. So, transfer payments to the provinces, untouched. Civil service, the bureaucracy, untouched. I mean, yes, it's going to come down from 9% year-over-year growth to something, inflation plus 1 or 2, but we're not cutting the public service. There's no indication of that, either what this prime minister said previously or what we saw in the throne speech. And then the entire kind of care economy developed by Justin Trudeau, which no doubt he sees as his legacy, pharmacare, dental care, daycare, all reaffirmed with, in fact, the dental care being supersized to families up to $85,000 a year. And again, lovely things, great things. Wish we could all pay for them. Well, we are paying for them. We're just doing it through debt and debt financing. And then add on that, Sean, a major commitment to defense spending, a modernization of our defense forces and reaching our 2% target. Too bad that in Europe this week, NATO agreed possibly that we now need to reach a 5% target. But we'll ignore that for now. And I don't know, Sean, I just put this together and it just looks like a massive amount of spending without a lot of attention or thought to this point, either inside or outside the throne speech, to what is the growth agenda that is actually going to create the preconditions to, sustain a revitalization, a reawakening of the Canadian economy, of Canadians' prospects, of opportunity and optimism in the country.
Yeah, it's a good point. You mentioned, Rudyard, for instance, the Carney government has said that it intends to lower the growth rate of program spending from an average of 9% annual growth during the Trudeau era to, as you say, something closer to 2% or so per year moving forward. Yet, this week, the government also, in addition to the speech on the throne, tabled the main estimates, which had gone untabled, of course, because Parliament hadn't been sitting since essentially prorogation in January. And the main estimates envision program spending this year, at least, going up at a rate comparable to the Trudeau era. So at this point, what's interesting about Mark Carney's leadership and his prime ministership, Rudyard, is that it's operating at a level. Might characterize it as like 30,000 feet or so. And when you're flying at that level, it sounds good. There's not a lot of trade-offs involved. People can kind of project onto it what they want it to be or how they themselves kind of conceptualize it. But at some point, presumably in the fall, it's going to come down to ground. And we're going to actually learn when faced with some of these trade-offs. How do you manage pipeline approvals in a world in which you have a sizable Quebec caucus, for instance? Or how do you cut spending, or at least, as you say, lower the growth rate of program spending when you have strong support from public sector trade unions? How do you manage, Canada's position on on Israel when you're being pulled in different directions. I mean, the list goes on and on. But you do get the sense that Mark Carney is going to get through this spring setting kind of walking on water. And at some point, politics will pull him in, and we'll get to know, can he swim? And how precisely this government is going to navigate what are no doubt going to be choppy waters.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I guess just to bring it back to, some hard facts, you put this agenda together, Sean, what, seems to be in the throne speech and what was telegraphed before in the Liberal platform. And it's hard to see how, if there is a budget as promised in the fall, we're not staring at potentially a increase in the deficit over already exceptional high levels, post-COVID. Basically, we've now gone through a post-COVID Trudeau era, and we're entering into a post-COVID Carney era. And again, there's all kinds of reasons to have policy preferences and, things you want to do. But the fact is that spending is not normalizing. Instead, it's tracking to this new kind of elevated COVID plateau. Yes. And I accept that this is not a problem just in Canada. It's a problem in the United States. It's a problem in a lot of European countries. But Canada is in a sense, compared to Europe and the United States, on its own. As I like to say in this program, we don't have a reserve currency. We have to borrow and issue bonds in Canadian dollars that, if we want to be honest with ourselves, the rest of the world doesn't need our currency. It can do anything it wants in dollars or euros or yen or renminbi. So I guess I don't know. You always project, right? You always kind of have to, I guess that's what the world is really about, is accepting it the way it is, not the way you want it to be. But I guess I always had thought maybe that Carney could be that kind of shrewder economic manager, someone who would be able to look at the post-COVID spending and understand that it wasn't sustainable and that we're crowding out private capital, we're crowding out private industry, that doubling down on deficit spending and debt-financed, quote, investments, close quote, it were, if we want to be clear with ourselves, they were some of the reasons, the underlying factors in the lost decade. They're not the entirety of the lost decade, but the last lost decade of income gains relative to the United States, of productivity gains. These find their roots in something that you've written eloquently a lot at the Hub, which is a kind of an approach by Ottawa and the federal government to buying growth, to a kind of sugar high of easy and quick fixes that usually mean extending federal balance sheets, extending federal borrowing to, quote, again, invest, close quote. I don't know, Sean. I'm just not seeing anything here yet. I'm willing to, be surprised, and I welcome it, but I'm not seeing anything from the Carney government that is either serious about productivity or serious about the factors that have led us to this moment now.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to respond to those observations. Mark Carney, at various points, is characterized himself as a pragmatist. The type of politician you're talking about is almost like a Mario Draghi, like technocrat. And I think as we get to know a bit more about Mark Carney and his politics, he isn't a sort of valueless, kind of hardcore technical empiricist. He does have a set of political values that underpin the way he thinks about these issues. And yes, of course, he's more focused on growth and growth enhancing policies than Justin Trudeau. But the notion that he is unconcerned with issues like entitlement spending and so on, I think it's wrong. And those voters, particularly kind of business types, who I think hoped they were getting a kind of Mario Draghi-like technocrat, may be surprised in the coming months that Carney is concerned around issues like climate change and inequality and all of these other issues that were part of the Trudeau government's agenda. If, though, Rudyard, we were trying to drink from a glass that's half full, we would say that perhaps the biggest development in the past several days isn't the speech from the throne. It's Tim Hodgson's speech days earlier in Calgary, the new energy minister who went out to Calgary and
Hmm.
delivered a set of remarks that have been, I think, broadly well received in the Calgary business community. He said a lot of the right things with respect to the importance of developing our natural resources and building energy infrastructure. It was a precursor, Rudyard, to a piece of legislation the government is poised to table in the coming days in the aftermath of a meeting this upcoming Monday between Prime Minister Carney and the premiers, where he'll unveil a plan to reform Canada's legislative and regulatory framework with respect to these major projects. We don't know all of the details yet, but it sounds like it's pushing our system in a direction that
Yeah.
I would broadly support.
Yeah, same
It
here,
may not
Sean.
go.
But as we've talked about, you take the entire resource sector, mining, everything to do with hydrocarbons and extraction, and it's single digits of the total GDP. I guess my beef here, and again, this can all change, and this prime minister and government could surprise us, but it's fundamentally a theory of government-led growth. That growth is achieved through government action, primarily spending either within industries or with partners to create, the conditions for economic development. And yes, you can get a lot of growth that way, and some growth probably could and should happen that way. We need to make strategic investments in a whole bunch of things. No argument there. But the other piece of it, the bigger piece that really affects all the rest of the economy that's outside of resources, surely has to give some nod, some thrust and emphasis to what are the underlying conditions that are holding back growth in the private sector writ large: regulation, taxation, rules around investments and how investments are treated from, again, a tax and regulatory perspective. We're hearing nothing of that. So kudos to the stuff on the energy front. Give them that all day Sunday and all next week. And for, as long as they want to sing that tune, I am with them. But I'm just not hearing anything here that is material yet to the underlying factors and forces that have been responsible for this lost decade, which is a collapse in the animal spirits in Canada, the collapse in new business formation, the soaring numbers of business exits, the extent to which whole swaths of the economy are overregulated, and to the extent where foreign competitors no longer even want to enter into our market to try to lower prices and displace incumbents because the levels of regulation, in effect, are now a protection, a wall against competition, both domestically, internally, but also from foreign players. I can go on and on. You know what I'm talking about. I'm just not seeing that. I'm just not hearing this from this guy, and it surprises me because he has a PhD in economics. He's run 2 central banks, and he was the chairman of one of the world's largest asset managers with Brookfield at $1 trillion. So he knows this stuff. You can't tell me that he doesn't know that you have to deal with taxation, you have to deal with regulation, you have to deal with the intersection of the two, you have to bring foreign capital into the country, but mum's the word, Sean, on all this stuff, and I just don't know why.
Yeah, it's hard for me to top that, Rudyard. As we talked earlier this week, I agree. Natural resources are massively important, but making progress on those files is a necessary yet insufficient response to the secular stagnation facing Canada's economy. As we wrap up this part of the podcast, if you'll permit me, let me just say that those in the Hub community that are interested of conceiving of and advancing ideas that can boost economic growth and strengthen Canadian living standards, stay tuned. On Monday, we're launching the 3rd annual Hunter Prize for Public Policy, Rudyard, with prizes up to $50,000 for bold ideas to address wicked problems. And listeners and viewers won't be surprised to hear that this year's wicked problem is Canada's slow and stagnant living standards. And we were hoping to get a lot of good ideas and from members of the Hub community and other Canadians. And hopefully that can be a catalog for the type of agenda, Rudyard, that you're rightly calling for.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hold my breath and count to 10 and hope we start getting a little rhetoric on these types of issues. Maybe they're not politically convenient for a Liberal government, but they are issues that we need to address: taxation, regulation, foreign investment, and understanding that true growth, lasting growth and prosperity has to be created by all of us. It cannot be engineered by government, and unlimited debt and deficit spending at these post-COVID levels. I don't know when the reckoning will happen, but look at global bond markets, United States, Japan, other places. It sounds like the vigilantes are mounting up. I don't know when they're going to ride into Ottawa, but we should never want that to happen. And that is something we can avoid. So let's say goodbye to our audience now, our complimentary audience. We'll join on the other side for a quick conversation about PR and proportional representation, and why it might be time for folks on the center right of the political spectrum to give PR a serious look. Back to you in a moment for the Heroes and Fellows Only portion of the Roundtable.